He wasn't. Couldn't imagine. He was real tremendous. One of the yeah. That's why. I'm not quite retired yet, but I'll remember that. All right. My brother retired. Okay, thank you. I'll see that. Up to you. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
It's already.
Great.
My understanding is it's already.
You know, the counties that want to hear it. It's ready. Again, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all.
Yeah, it's fine.
Testing 1, 2.
I'll just sit right here. I'll leave it all.
Okay.
Use that.
Yeah. It is exactly 6 o'clock. Any of you who've ever visited Vassar know that no event starts on time. We're gonna give about 5 more minutes before we start, just for stragglers who are coming to the dining hall or their last lab or whatever to get over here.
Last night, in a small town about an hour away, our friend Ira retired. Visited him. It's near Newport.
Okay.
So we just drove over.
Yeah. Where are you going?
Tomorrow, tonight, we're going to go up to Lake George and have a meeting up there. And then Friday, we're in Albany, and 2 days in between.
Okay. And where do you?
Oh, my wife and I live in New Jersey. I recently moved there. Yeah, we lived in Washington, D.C. And my wife was been raised in Warrensburg. I have friends that have been visiting Warrensburg, is right next to we took advantage of the speaking engagements.
Well, then you could take it as all.
We have to be back later.
Although the Trump tax killer.
It's 959 7293 959 7293 3619 or 3613.
Okay, once I get this, the first 300 to go.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's 5 after, so I think we'll go ahead and get started with our program tonight. It's great to see so many people here excited to talk about trash and recycling. I'm Kirsten Menking. I'm the director of the Environmental Studies program here and in the Department of Earth Science and Geography. And there are a whole lot of different organizations who are co-sponsoring this event tonight. The Bard Center for the Environment and Humanities, is somebody here from there? Okay, Hudson Valley Air Quality Coalition, Beacon Climate Action Now, yay, way to represent. Communities for Local Power, Zero Waste USA, okay. Concerned Citizens of Dover,
Here.
all right. Dutchess Greens,
Right here.
okay, cool. Working Class Dutchess. All right. Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions. Hey, you're probably the farthest travel. Clean Air Action Network of Glens Falls. Was wrong, it's even farther. And Zero Waste Warren County. These folks are probably joining us from online. So we've got a really interesting speaker tonight, Neil Seldman, who's right here in the front. Neil, I just learned, formerly manufactured cosmetics and personal care products when he was young, and then went on to become a professor of political science, working on political theory, and is very interested in Marx and Engels. And he decided that teaching wasn't for him and went and founded the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and then went on to found or co-found the National Recycling Coalition, Zero Waste USA, and Save the Albatross Coalition. So maybe we'll talk about all of those things. But his work really focuses on trying to develop independent recycling businesses to try to help communities avoid garbage incineration. So figuring out ways to reduce waste so that we don't have to burn it or landfill it. And he works in the US, but he shares his information and also learns from international organizations and businesses. And so he's going to be talking to us about our local incineration problem and and how we might be able to turn Dutchess County into a zero waste community. But before he does that, we have the Bernz family. David and Jacob Bernz are going to come down and play a little music for us to get us all in the mood. And they run the guitar store in Beacon. So if any of you are needing strings or capos or whatever, go visit them. So Jacob and David, if you'll come down.
You don't have a microphone, but hopefully you can hear us. Mr. Thompson calls the waiter, orders steak and baked potato. He eats the bone and bristle and he never eats the skin. Then a busboy comes and takes it, the cock contaminates it, puts it in a can with coffee, round and sardine pits. Then a truck comes by on Friday to cart it all away. 1,000 trucks just like a barge verging on the bay. Oh, garbage! Garbage! We're filling up the street with garbage. What will we do when there's no place left to put all the garbage? Now the way this works, when I say garbage, you repeat back to me. Garbage, garbage, garbage. Mr. Thompson starts his Cadillac, winds it down the freeway track, leaving friends and neighbors in a higher parking haven. And he's joined by lots of smaller cars, all sending gases to the stars, up before receding clouds and end for 30 days. The sun looks down into it with its ultraviolet tongue, turns into smog, and then it settles in our lungs. Oh, garbage! Garbage! We're filling up our skies with garbage. What will we do when there's nothing left to breathe but garbage? Getting home, he's taking off his shoes, sits down to watch the evening news while he's through homework with the TV and an ear. Superman with 1,000 times sells talking dolls and pockets crying. Dutifully they learn the date of birth of all years. The victory's got a piece about the mayor's new name. He gets it read in time to watch the Wheel of Fortune game. Oh, what will we do? We're filling up our minds with garbage. What will we do when there's nothing left to watch but garbage? That's how Bill Steele wrote the song 30-something years ago. But Seeger wrote this last verse. At Mr. Thompson's factory, they're making plastic Christmas trees, complete with silver tinsel and a geophysics stand. And the plastic comes from giant vats, from some conglomeration that comes from deep beneath the earth, and mine from the land. If you ask them any questions, they'll say, why don't you say that's absolutely for the economy? Oh, God. Their stocks and their bonds, all garbage. What will it be do when their system goes to smash? There's no value to their tax, no money to be made for the world to be repaid. When children read in history books about financiers and other crooks, and dualism and slavery, and all that thievery, the history of their side, along with many other kinds of Oh, okay. I see.
Last garbage song in the night, I swear. This song was written by Einbender, who left us a few years ago. Up and down the valley with singer Pete Seeger, as part of the Hudson Valley Sleep Singers, which my dad was also a member of. And this song he called "It Really Isn't Garbage." Talked about, I think, some of the themes of the night. Really is garbage, really makes it all together.
Really is garbage, you throw it away. Separate your paper, plastic, compost, life, and metal. And then you'll get to use it all another day. There's garbage in the kitchen, garbage in the bathroom, garbage in the basement, and in the backyard too. Sometimes it seems to me that we are burying our future. If all the trash gives me the garbage, but it really is garbage. Things all together. It really is garbage. We throw it away. Separate your paper, plastic, compost, plastic, then you get to use it all another day. Now, don't you put it in a landfill, get it into drinking water. Put it in first the fish and pieces. When you put it in the sea, reuse, recycle. That's the pollution. Depend on someone else, it's up to you, man. Because it really is garbage. Then you get it up together. It really is garbage. You throw it away. Separate your paper, plastic, compost, plastic, metal. Then you get to use it all another day. Now there are those who say we really ought to burn it. Not so convenient, makes the job and electricity. But if you're gonna burn it, you know you're gonna speak. What to do with ashes, well, there's no guarantee. And really, garbage, they mix it all together. And really, garbage, you throw it away. And separate your paper, plastic, compost, plastic, then you get to use it all another day. Now all of it will only work if everybody does it. So always pay attention when you go to the store. Encourage businesses to start to recycle. Buy it unless there's been something somewhere before. If you need a car,
Well, I never had an introduction like that before. David and Jacob, thank you so much. And I hope my remarks can live up to the message of their singing. I haven't heard those songs in a while, and it's just wonderful. And I'll say this, the last song, Don't Mix It, is the name of the game. Keep it, I say, keep it separate, stupid. If you mix it together, you've got garbage and pollution. If you keep it separate, you have natural resources. And I must say, my very good friend, Mary Applehoff, who is the owner of Urban Ore, which is an iconic waste recycling company out in Berkeley. Years ago, she said, it's not waste until you decide to waste it. So if you've got a banana peel in your hand, it's only waste if you don't put it in the compost pile, compost bucket. Well, thank you so much. So many different groups put a lot of energy into orchestrating this, and thank you for coming out. And what I will do, I'll talk for about 35 minutes. I will talk about what's going on around the country, what I think or we think is going on here in Dutchess County, and what are the alternatives that Dutchess County decision makers, hopefully influenced by a rising tide of citizens like yourselves can be accomplished. Okay, I just to let you know, if someone could come tell me how to manipulate this thing, I'd appreciate it. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
If I could just scroll down a little at a time.
2 fingers.
Oh, okay,
There's 2 fingers and just scroll up.
great. Thank you very much. I should say, oh boy. Well, let me get started anyway. Could you come back up again? I didn't quite get. You could tell how familiar I am with electronics. These 2 fingers.
Or you could bring it to here.
Can you just use the down arrow?
That'll work too, yeah.
Great, okay. I work for Zero Waste USA, which is a group of about 8 to 10 of us. We are technically skilled, committed to working for grassroots organizations, including small businesses that are sensitive to the communities in which they live and operate. And I work a good deal with citizen groups that are fighting incinerators. And I want to start off by pointing out that since the late 70s, over 500 planned garbage incinerators have been defeated by organized citizens and small businesses. A very typical scenario is that a small business person, a bakery owner in Austin, Texas, a carpentry company in other cities, they provided the initial money for organizing, and then citizen organizers have taken over from there. And the whole list of organizations that the professor Menking read off are the ones in your local area, whether they're fighting incinerators, clean air, or social justice. These are the types of groups that are our clientele, if you will. I personally am working in 5 cities in which we're trying to close incinerators. It's much harder to close an incinerator than to keep it from being built. And in Dutchess County, you're being challenged. You soon will be challenged, I believe, with both problems, because as I read the current solid waste plan from the county, they want to continue using the existing incinerator, and in a few years they want to build another one. And I will explain why I think that is the absolute worst thing that could happen to this community in terms of its financial picture, financial health, and of course its environmental health. I'm working in Montgomery County, which is unusual. Montgomery County, Maryland, it's a jurisdiction with 1 million people. It's unusual because there, the county executive wants to shut the incinerator. It's still extremely difficult because there are contracts involved, and there are people who run these incinerators who are ideologically committed to these incinerators. It's been their career. They think incineration makes a whole lot of sense. We, of course, disagree with them, but the inertia of an existing incinerator authority or a Department of Environment that's running an incinerator is a very formidable force against change. I'm also, working in Minneapolis, where citizens are organized to shut down an incinerator in Hennepin County, where the county where Minneapolis is. And we're working in Baltimore, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, where the city of Chester is, Long Beach, California. The point is that all across the country, citizens are getting together to shut down these incinerators. Several have already been shut down throughout the country, and several are being proposed, but there has not been a new one built since the year 2000. We believe better organizing would have defeated that one, but that's not the story tonight. it's incredibly important for people to understand. In fact, my wife and I had lunch here in the cafeteria, and I noticed that you have your recycling bins, and right next to it, there's a bin, and it says landfill. Well, that's not accurate, because garbage from Vassar, unless I'm mistaken, is going to that incinerator. And I think students and faculty and people who work at the university should know that. Now, there's a big debate, landfill, which pollutes more, landfill or incinerator. Incinerators pollute more, and it's virtually impossible to stop the pollution. And it's pollution that's much more deadly when it comes to human life. These incinerators are pumping out tons each year: cadmium, lead, mercury. These are known killers. I don't have to go into details. And they also put out acid gases, hydrochloric acid, oxides of nitrogen, sulfur dioxide. And just to give you a sense of how impactful these things are, we did work out in San Diego, where we were successful years ago, and it turned out that a 2,000 ton per day incinerator, we worked with the scientists, was going to emit something like, I think it was 12 tons of sulfur dioxide a year. Now, I'm a layperson when it comes to these scientific terms. I don't know what that meant, but we went to the medical people and they translated that. And that amount of SO2 going into the air is the equivalent of 225,000 cars driving by your house every day. So that's how dramatic the pollution is coming from these incinerators. They do have pollution control equipment, but that pollution control equipment is measured by, and the limits that the federal government and the state governments put on it, those limits are based on the technology available to control those pollutants. It has nothing to do with how they impact our health. So when someone says, well, we're burning garbage, we're meeting the federal guidelines, we're meeting the state guidelines, that says nothing to you about the threat to your health from breathing these elements. And let me make it even more graphic. SO2 is one of the things that aggravates asthma. Asthma is a scourge on rich people and poor people. It hits poor people harder, poor people living in concentrated cities, but also poor people don't have the medical resources that middle class and upper class people have. And in Minneapolis, one of the members of our coalition, the coalition to shut down the incinerator, is an emergency room doctor. And she was talking about how her staff is dealing with emergency visits from emergency room visits for asthma sufferers. So the amount of money that we're paying for solid waste management through an incinerator, you have to add the costs of those the cost of medical imposition. And there was a study that we did involve, that we did not do it. We, working with the people who did the actual study, I could get you all these documents. And they calculated, this is a city of 650,000 people burning about 1,000 tons of garbage a year. And what they found was that as a result of just one pollutant, that's particulate matter, these tiny little elements that we breathe in, they're laden with dioxin, they're laden with lead and cadmium and mercury, that as a result of the incinerator operating, the people are dying before their natural life cycle. I think the average age for men and women is roughly 78, 77 years. So these people were dying before their time, and they calculated the cost of the loss of those lives. And it came out, the economic cost, and it came out to $55 million a year. Now, when we go for start analyzing an incinerator, the first thing we did, well, what does it cost per ton? $75 a ton, $80 a ton. But you have to add that $55 million to the per ton costs. And when you do that, the costs escalate, and it makes zero waste programs, which I'll describe momentarily, cheaper, far cheaper, just straight dollar for dollar comparison. Plus, as I will hope to convince you, zero waste strategy is also an economic development strategy. I calculated based on extrapolating numbers from other cities that if the incinerator was shut and a zero waste program were implemented, we would have at least 350, perhaps 400 good jobs in Dutchess County. And I define good jobs as a job that has sufficient wages and health benefits to keep or to bring a family and keep a family in middle-class income range in this country. One other thing I want to say about reuse, one aspect of the zero waste program is recycling, composting, and reuse. Reuse is a very small portion of the waste stream, maybe 2 to 5% of what we throw out can be recovered, repaired, and reused. But that's where the most concentration of jobs are. And it's not only creating jobs, it's reskilling people, because many of these companies that start off with electronic deconstruction and repair, mattress deconstruction and repair, appliances, and other products, furniture, for example. These jobs are made for people without good workforce skills, high school dropouts, veterans, Army veterans who have not gone to school, ex-offenders, people who've been in incarceration. And let me say on that last subject, which is recidivism. Recidivism is the rate at which a person who comes out of incarceration within 3 years goes back into incarceration. It's a plague on every community, whether that person is in your family or whether you're a victim of a crime. And these reuse businesses, because they're teaching skills that allow people to earn jobs, not in the company they are being trained in, but other companies as well, the recidivism rate goes down by 2/3. The national average is about 75, 76%. Recycle Force in Indianapolis has a recidivism rate of 23%. One company, a building deconstruction company, taking down a building, but doing it carefully, preserving the bricks, the wood, the floorings, etc. The company is called Humanum. They got contracts to deconstruct abandoned houses. Baltimore has played with abandoned houses, maybe 20,000. And that company had 3 years in a row of none of their employees going back, a zero rate of recidivism. And as I said before, you actually can put a dollar figure on that, but the social impact of reduced recidivism is almost uncalculable. Now, I went through all of that, okay, and now let me just say that what's happening now, it's very ironic, because let me just go in and say it. It's very ironic that your people here, your decision makers here, not only love their incinerator, want to keep it going and want to build another one. It's ironic that at this time in history, the upsurge in recycling, composting, and reuse is revolutionary. And I'll give you very specific examples. But I want to say this first. It's not only ironic, it's tragic, because you could handle all the garbage that's generated in the county using a zero waste, a combined system at a lower cost and eliminate the pollution that's threatening your health. So that makes the ironic thing, it makes it tragic that you folks, if there's not an upswell of organized citizen activity to shut down the current incinerator and prevent the second one, it is tragic, both financially as well as human health-wise. Now, why do these things get built? Well, in America, in the United States, things get built because they are vested interests in building them, even if they're not the appropriate thing. And that is what it's like when you're an incumbent official, you're in office, and someone suggests building an incinerator, building a convention center, building a prison. It means a bond issue, a Wall Street bond issue of hundreds of millions of dollars to replace the current incinerator, as I meant in Dutchess, probably $500 to $600,000, $500 to $600 million, and paying it off over 20 years, amortizing it. You basically will double that. So you're looking at the largest investment that the county will make in not only your generation, but the next generation, to build something that will be a threat to your health. So when you have that so much of a vested interest, you create an ideology around it. That is, you create ideas which are not scientific, but they defend what you want to do. And therefore you create an ideology, and you believe in that ideology, and you will not allow facts or science to interfere with the logic of that ideology. And that is what we're faced with right now. And let me give you a very clear example of how this type of ideology forms decisions that are bad for us. The US EPA, years ago, about 12 years ago, created a solid waste management hierarchy. Don't buy it first, recycle it, reuse it, compost it, and then finally you have to dispose of it if you can't do anything. And in the EPA hierarchy, which you go on EPA and take a look at it now, it says that burning garbage for energy is a better alternative than landfill. And there's a great environmental organizer in the United States. His name is Mike Ewall, E-W-A-L-L. He had been working for a group called Energy Justice Network. He's now working for another group called No Burn. I think it's noburn.org. And Mike has developed over the last few years the best history of every incinerator in the country. It's comprehensive. It's really quite a task he and his staff has done. And what Mike has done, and most recently, he's been pestering EPA to defend their hierarchy, saying that burning garbage is better than landfilling it. And what he discovered is that EPA had absolutely no data supporting that hierarchy. And if you had gone to EPA's webpage and looked at their solid waste management hierarchy, let's say a month ago or 2 months ago, you would see it right there. It's a upside down triangle and so forth. But now, if you go up there, there's a disclaimer because of Mike's work that says there is no evidence. We're working on the data for this, and it's their cop out. They did not do their homework, and yet that chart, that hierarchy, has been the basis of the ideology of incineration. We're dealing with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, which of course they have several burners in the state. They are pro-burn. They are leading the ideologists of incineration. New York State, unfortunately, has many of those people as well. What MPCA is telling their citizens, hey, US EPA says this is the best thing to do with your garbage. And even when Mike presents this information, they refuse to admit that there is no justification for saying that burning is better than burying. And of course, EPA is going to take 1.5 years or 2 years. So until it comes out, they will be clinging to the claim that incineration is better than landfill. And I bet a nickel that if you ask the people who are running the incinerator here, they will point to the EPA hierarchy and say, you see, we're doing the right thing. So that hierarchy and the refusal for government officials to acknowledge the harm that's coming out of these incinerators is the result of years and years of lobbying, heavy spending, and disinformation, which has been put into what we'll call an incineration ideology. Okay, now we talk about the positive things. There is a compost revolution going on in the United States. If you keep your organic matter is the largest single component in the waste stream. You've got yard debris, your grass clippings, etc., storm debris after street cleanups, you have food scraps, and all of that adds up to about 35 to 40% of your waste stream. If you live down south, it would be a little more. They have year-round growth. And there are two things you could do with that. You could compost it to create topsoil, which is definitely needed all across the country. Good top compost on the eastern seaboard is worth about $75 a ton. 1 cubic yard of compost is, 3 cubic yards of compost equals 1 ton. And if it's good and clean, and you could, you know what good soil tastes like, feels like. It's a wonderful thing, and you could actually breathe that wonderful smell. And the other thing about composting is there's no economy of scale. You could do it in your kitchen within a worm bin, which I raised my kids on worm bin. My daughter is still doing it with her kids. And the other alternative is a community scale system. We call those compost gardens. There's a wonderful example of this if you ever get to South Baltimore. The Filbert Street Garden is a 1 acre garden created by the community. It's right across the street from an elementary school. The young people have their own plants, they raise pets, they raise trees, they raise bees, and other crops. It's just absolutely marvelous. Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, we helped get them a grant. They built a small asphalt compost pad, it's called, right next to the garden. They started a new company, the Baltimore Compost Collective. They use bikes, bike trailers and trucks. They go to businesses and collect their separated organic material or their household. I think it costs the household $5 a month. The businesses pay much more, but less than they would pay for traditional garbage pickup. The young people do the composting, and the material just gets shifted right over to the garden. So you could do it at that scale. And of course, then you can have a municipal centralized system. We don't want to over-centralize it. I think the best economy of scale is between 200 and 400 tons per day. If you go higher than that, you could run into management problems. And that was the exact problem that happened about 12 years ago in Wilmington, Delaware. They built a company built a compost system, a small independent company, and they were composting receiving 300 tons per day, producing a little bit less than that. The World Bank was sending from Washington, D.C. was sending their cafeteria scraps there. Washington was, Baltimore was, New York City was, and Philadelphia as well. The company ran into some financial problems, and they made the mistake of going to a major national solid waste management company for money. Well, that company eventually got control of the company and immediately expanded the facility from 300 tons per day to 600 tons per day. And things started going wrong, started stinking, and a year later, the company lost its permit and the facility was shut down. It's an important story because there are 4 companies in the United States, Waste Management Inc., Republic, Waste Connections, I forget the other name, that are monopolies. And they control 60, 70% not only of the landfill market, they own more than 50% of the processing market for recyclables. So they have monopolies if you want to recycle and if you want to landfill. And this is a major problem which we can talk about later. But the point of the story of Delaware's company that went bankrupt is that from that point on, citizens in the mid-Atlantic area of Maryland, DC, Howard County, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, the upswell from citizens who demanded composting programs. That means collection, source separation, collection of your organics, and composting facilities. And now each one of those facilities has a major composting program. In Howard County, you have a system that's sized just for Howard County. In Prince George's County, just below that, you have a system that was built to accommodate much more than the organics coming from Prince George's County. So they are now receiving materials from Washington, DC, from Baltimore, and they're charging it what's called a tip fee. For every ton you deliver, you have to pay a certain amount. And in fact, Prince George's County is amortizing its facility on using other people's source separated organics for composting. Ulster County, which is your neighbor right up here, have an excellent program. They're doing something that I don't think any other community has done. They have just put out an RFP, a request for proposal for the private sector to come in and build a reuse center, a facility for several reuse companies. Each reuse company needs about 20,000 square feet, 15 workers. So if you build a facility or you redevelop an old school that's closed, you have a number of different workshops for which reuse companies can locate, whether it's mattresses, appliances, electronics. For deconstruction, you need a bit more than that. You need a big warehouse. And there's a wonderful model, again, if you go to Baltimore, Second Chance, in right downtown Baltimore, right near the baseball and football stadiums, 300,000 square feet of sales room where crews go out. They have 260 workers that go out in crews. They go all the way up here to New York, they go down to Florida, and they go as far west as Ohio. They deconstruct buildings, they bring the material back to Baltimore, and they're sold. And Urban Ore, which I mentioned before, out in Berkeley, California, they do the same thing. And these are the types of businesses that will be started if you have a zero waste infrastructure. There may be happy to have questions, and I'm going to end here. There's no solution other than community organizing. It's the only thing that can beat monopolies, is for people to get together and to say, let me give you this story. It's from, I think, Lawrence, Massachusetts. And I witnessed this. There was a company at the time years ago called Browning Ferris Industries. It's now part of Republic. They all eat each other up and consolidate. And BFI made a proposal to the city to allow them to build a 3,000 ton per day garbage incinerator. And the city would be able to put its garbage in that incinerator for free. That would be their quote unquote host community fee. And the vote was 8-1 in favor of the incinerator. I went back the next week because in that particular city, every bill has to have a second reading. I don't know if that's the case here, but it happens across the country. And at that second hearing, they took another vote, and the vote was 9-0 against the incinerator. And what happened was that during that week, there was a woman, can't remember her name, she was a very sophisticated bond trader on Wall Street. And she did the numbers, and she showed that all the financial risk falls on the city, and all the economic gains goes to the company. And she made a speech as she was presenting her data, and she said, in light of this, if you vote to build this plant, I will never vote for you again, and my children will never vote for you again. And that message turned the 8-1 vote into a 9-0 vote against the incinerator. And what I'm telling you is that you as citizens here, organized citizens, need to take the same approach. And it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican or independent. The incumbent people who want to build these incinerators, that's their issue. It goes across politics, left or right or in the middle. And I'll end my talk by giving a short synopsis of how I think you should approach this issue of burning garbage versus zero waste. And that is, tax what you don't want. Start putting taxes on plastic. I'll tell you this story. Years and years ago, you may remember that we had aerosol cans, and then they discovered the hole in the ozone, and they outlawed aerosol cans to give you whatever product you wanted. And the industry fought it up until the day that the new law was to take place. And literally, they had ads: if you take away aerosol spray deodorants, the world's going to fall apart. They were plugging that until the day that it was going to be illegal. And that next day, they had their products on the shelves without aerosol cans. And that is what you have to tell these manufacturers. These manufacturers do not have to use plastic. And if they do use plastic, they could use refillable plastic. In fact, another part of the revolution that's happening in this country, besides composting and reuse, which I alluded to, was rewashable plastic tableware, cups, plates, knives, and forks. And there are many companies now, I have a list of them here if people are interested. And what they do is they come to an entity, an institution like Vassar, and say, look, you have so many people here. You need, I'm making up a number, 5,000 sets of our plastic. And once you purchase it, we will also build you, or you could build your own, a facility for washing. And you can eliminate all the plastic from throwaway, takeout places, your cafeterias here as well. There are many, many examples of these reuse companies coming into their own and showing that they can save an institution such as Vassar or a local government or a restaurant chain. In fact, there's one of these companies that if you're a restaurant, it's called Plastic-Free Restaurants. You can .com or .org, and you can see it. And what they do is they say, well, the first thing, if you go to a school system, they'll say, well, we'd have to put in a washing machine because we just use the one ways. And this company says, okay, we'll buy you the washing machine. Or if you do it, we'll reimburse you. If they were to become a client of these types of reuse companies. So I believe that with composting, with reuse, recycling we're doing pretty well with recycling, although we have a lot more to go. And I want to end by saying that zero waste, define zero waste. Zero waste is reducing the current waste stream by 90% or more, organics out of landfills, ban products and packages that have toxic materials in them, and sending to landfill about 10% of our current waste stream that is inert. So there's no leachate, there's no methane being escaping, and that is what that is what zero waste is. And finally, I talked about irony and tragedy. Another part of the irony or tragedy is that the federal government right now will give you the money to do exactly what you want. My colleague Gary Liss is an expert on federal funding. I will send you, if anyone requests it, a PowerPoint identifying all the agency, USDA, EDA, Commerce, Economic Development Administration is within Commerce, that will, and EPA, of course, that will give your community, in some cases directly to citizen groups that are organizing for these companies, the money you need to capitalize the zero waste infrastructure. As my colleague Gary Liss, who's very influential, he's a thought leader in the Sierra Club, in many of the national environmental organizations. And you, as citizens, can demand that your the decision makers in the county avail themselves of this capital. As Gary says, it's a once in a generation opportunity to capitalize a solid waste management infrastructure the right way. So for all of those reasons, I urge you to stay organized. There are 7 or 8 organizations represented here. I am thrilled. It's a wonderful compliment to not only me, but to Joel Tyner, who's the super organizer around here, and of course, Judy, his mom, who gave him the right genes. Stay organized. There's technical assistance out there. People like Mike Ewall are available to you either through Zoom or right now he's out west on a tour. He is comprehensive in his research, meticulous and compulsive in getting to the truth. And besides, he's not the only one out there. There are many great people fighting for this. And you're not alone. You've got colleagues and sister brother organizations across the country. We all share information, and we are available for whatever you need to fight this battle in terms of technical assistance. We could do a zero waste plan. If you don't have, if the county won't pay for it, we'll come up with some arrangement to raise the money. In Baltimore, we did a plan for 30,000. In Minneapolis, we did our plan for 20,000. In Montgomery County, we did our plan for 75,000 because the government was paying for it. So we will be here for you. It's a great zero waste network. It's not just my organization. It's many, many excellent organizations that are out there to help you fight and win this battle. Thank you very much for your time. And I'm sure there are plenty of questions, sir.
Do you have a printed text of this that you can?
Do you have a printout of this presentation?
What I would, the question was, is there a printout of this? I will get you printout. If you leave your name and email with Judy, I will get you, we'll get this thing transcribed and I will get it sent out to anyone here who wants it.
Have you all signed the board that was read around?
No.
It's very important to us to have your names and my dad is almost all through.
Could we put up those 2 charts? I'll just take 3 minutes to explain these 2 charts to you. They come from our project in Minneapolis. We're working for a group called the Minneapolis Environmental Justice Table, and they have a coalition called HERC, H-E-R-C, which is the name of their incinerator. So these are drafts, but we have all the data to back up these drafts. And let me explain them to you. Great, thank you. The chart, let's see, which one is this? Okay, the chart that has the angle going up and down, that is our prescription for zero waste. In the immediate year or so after the incinerator is shut down, delivery to landfill will increase naturally. But as zero waste programs start being implemented, you will see recycling go up, landfilling go down. Now, the other one labeled the county plan, their quote unquote zero waste plan, because everyone uses the term zero waste. And let me put in a plug for Zero Waste International Alliance. We came up with the definition of zero waste, which I summarized for you, and we sent it around the world. And there are dozens, if not scores, of local agencies that have adopted our definition of zero waste. Other incinerator people say, okay, we're zero waste to landfill, which of course means they're going to burn it. And by the way, you can't be zero waste if you have to landfill if you have an incinerator, because every incinerator there's ash residue, which could be 20 to 30% of what you put in the incinerator comes out as ash. So every incinerator needs a landfill. And of course, the difference is that the landfill ash is hazardous. And what we're talking about in zero waste is landfilling inert material. So let me get to the zero waste closure plan that these folks came up with. The first thing you'll see is that the incinerator, instead of being shut down in 2026, goes all the way to 2040, which is basically the same plan that your people here in Dutchess County have. And the point of these charts is that after you invest in zero waste systems, at the end of when 2040 comes around, you have a living, vibrant infrastructure to handle your waste for generations. If you go with their scenario, in 2040, you have an incinerator that's probably going to be hazardous to deal with that you have to get rid of. And then you're going to have to do something, whether build a new incinerator or start your zero waste program. So obviously, from our point of view, start your zero waste program now. Start negotiating the landfill contracts that you need to start the process and shut down the Dutchess incinerator and proceed with your investments to a zero waste infrastructure. Sorry, that was a long answer to this gentleman's question. Any other questions? Yes, Ms.
Thank you for your presentation. You pointed out the difficulty of following the EPA hierarchy.
Yeah.
And Mike Kudos has challenged that, and they have the asterisk, we'll get back to you with more information. But I looked at the CLCPA scoping plan before I came here tonight to see what the advisory panel said about incinerators. And they didn't say anything negative about them. And I wonder what, your insights are to the New York State plan, the CLCPA and incinerators.
I think New York State, the DEC, is in the same category as the MPCA in Minneapolis. They're ideologues for incineration. Now, that doesn't mean that every person who works with the DEC is promoting incineration. I'm sure that's not true. But the official policy of the DEC is that incineration is fine.
But the CLCPA are a law that directs us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They have advisory panel, community leadership.
Yeah, this is very important. Thank you for bringing this up. There's something called CAP, Climate Action Plans, and EPA is now requiring each community to have a plan. And you could get federal funding to produce your plan. So again, I don't know this in this county, but you have to find the group of usually it's officials plus citizens and probably business people as well, who are putting together the climate action plan. There's a woman from Zero Waste Warren County, Tracy Frisch, F-R-I-S-C-H. She is very familiar with this. She is one of the key people in the Glens Falls Clean Air Action Network. So we could get you information on community action plans. But those are the plans that have to be submitted showing that the community wants zero waste, not incineration. But I would say right now, as you did, if you go to those resources, they will be neutral or even positive about incineration. And we have, as citizens, organized citizens, we have to change that. If there's follow-up, use my email. I'm very easy to get to and have follow-up discussions through email or just phone calls or Zoom calls. And also, yeah.
Vanessa can respond to this.
Oh,
question.
please do. Yes. Oh, Vanessa, I didn't see you there. Hi.
No worries. Wait a minute. There's a mic right there. Oh.
Vanessa is Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions.
Also known as WASP. Hello, everyone. We're also fighting an incinerator down at Peekskill, just a few miles south. But to comment on what you said, you're absolutely right. And we did have an ally who was on the climate action committee, or I can't recall the name, Raya Salter, who you may know. She's from the Energy Policy Energy Policy Institute. She's an attorney in New Rochelle who's been working quite a bit on the CLCPA process, and then has been part of kind of the community input process as well. She, during the hearings that took place with the New York State Senate, did actually question Senator Harcum, who's the chair of the Environmental Conservation Council, specifically about incineration and the fact that we need to start moving towards the end of these facilities because of how old they are, and it specifically brought up the fact that he has an incinerator in his district. So though the council itself was not able to move forward with solidifying or recommending the end of incineration in New York, I think that that's a bit of a conflict of interest. There were people who were on that council who were also part of the incineration industry. New York State has 10 incinerators in the entire state, the most amount in the entire country. So it's going to be a very hard fight in terms of the state level. But there are people on that council who were on that council that are very much on our side. So we do need to continue to advocate. We need to make sure that our state legislators understand the health impacts and how detrimental these facilities are in our communities. Because I think there is a solid waste coalition starting to build around this. On the state level, a number of different organizations, the SWABs down in the city, the solid waste advisory boards for the different part of the boroughs are very aware that they're sending their trash to incinerators to communities like ours. So they're starting to coalesce around kind of an agenda that really focuses on zero waste and really focuses on seeing the end of incinerators, ensuring that we're not building any new ones and that we're looking to really put into place resources so we can see a real transition plan. And Neil's been part of those conversations as well.
I also want to point out that Courtney Williams is here, another great organizer from West Carolina. What's the name of the organization?
Same.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, I want you to know that you're going to learn something from we usually have each project, we usually have Monday night is Detroit and so on and so forth. And when you get on these Zoom calls and everyone is invited, you just learn a tremendous amount. And the cross-fertilization between Westchester County and Dutchess County is really terrific because you're fighting the same battles.
Every Tuesday at 8 o'clock, you're welcome to join our Zoom meeting. It's you go to zerowasteDutchess.org. Is that how you get it?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's it.
And
Do it in microphone.
ZeroWasteDutchess.org, 8 o'clock every Tuesday. And we open it to everybody. We don't care, just get on. And you don't have to have your video if you don't want.
8 o'clock.
On Facebook? Okay.
It's also Zero Waste Dutchess on Facebook.
Great, thank you, Chief. Yes, Miss.
Can you tell us where the incinerator in Dutchess County is and where's the one that they're proposing?
I must confess. Could you-
Stand Dock Road. Stand Dock Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the existing one? And they want to build another one in the same location or different?
Probably in the same. The official plan that the citizens got to look at, it left it open as to whether they were going to build another one, but there are several sentences in there indicating that that is their plan. That this incinerator, I think it's a new incinerator, is at least 25, possibly 30 years old. And as they get older, they're more expensive to run. For instance, in Baltimore, we found out that just to keep the Baltimore incinerator, which is an old incinerator, within federal and state limits, they needed to invest $95 million. And once you put the equipment in, it's very expensive to operate, millions of dollars a year just to operate the precipitators and all the other sophisticated technology. And as I said before, it doesn't protect us. It's still, those limits are still kicking out stuff that is bad for us.
Who's in charge of the incinerator?
Well, I'm almost sure there's an authority.
Yeah.
Probably called the Dutchess County Resource Recovery Authority. That is the official agency that owns the facility, although they subcontract with another company. It's either Wheelabrator or Covanta to operate. It's Wheelabrator in Westchester and Covanta in Dutchess. So these are incineration companies that are on contract. Wheelabrator, excuse me. Yeah. I believe, does someone know when the contract is up?
27.
27. Oh, okay, so if I were, I hope you do move forward on this, my suggestion would be that set that as your, we want this incinerator to shut down when this contract is over. And you have to be very careful. I'll tell you, Montgomery County, the current county executive is Mark Elridge. He just started his second 4-year term. When he won in his first 4-year term, one of his platforms was to shut down the incinerator. As the last county executive was leaving office on midnight, he signed a 5-year extension for that contract. And that happens all the time. So you really have to, you need a lawyer, and Mikey Moore is a lawyer. He could advise you on I don't think he could be your lawyer because he's working on so many others, but he could help you find the right type of lawyer to pay attention, because you have to pay very careful attention, particularly on extending a contract for another 5 or 6 years for these incinerators.
This is a county-owned thing.
Yes.
The county owns this building, I mean, but we rent it out for, and if we want to sell it, Wheelabrator gets to buy it from us.
Same thing in Westchester.
Yeah, after, if, let's say, hopefully.
And run it.
Right. So, as I said, these incinerators really infiltrate your community, and they tie up the decision makers. So you need to have a lawyer looking. I know that Mike Ewell is the lawyer for our projects. It took him weeks and weeks to find out what legally has to, Mr. Elridge, the county executive in Montgomery, what he had to do to end the contract. And it's very technical. And the county executive took the information on how to shut it down to his own department of DEC, his own local EPA, and they had no idea how to shut the incinerator. And it's also very interesting that Mr. Elridge hired me and my team because he didn't trust his DEC. They were giving him pro-information thing. It's impossible. Zero waste is impossible. You never can do it. Meanwhile, cities are 70, 80% there. So he hired us because he could not trust the people who were supposed to be reporting activity, actual facts to him. And that's why community groups hire us when they can't get their government to hire the proper people to do this planning. Because just remember, the Resource Recovery Authority and DEC are financially, psychologically, and intellectually committed to incineration. And that's what you have to fight. You have to fight inertia.
So
Government bureaucratic inertia. And as I said before, Mr. Elridge has been trying, this is the 5th year, there's 3 more years after this. We're hoping he can do it because it's very, very complicated, even when your local government wants it, because his DEC, the DEP in that particular case, did not want to shut the incinerator.
I had a question from over here. Hi, so if we want to fight something like this, it's a lot of arguments and you want some ammunition in those arguments. And I can't say, 47 children got cancer from this thing, or there's a terrible thing, nobody's had a live baby over there for years, or whatever it's going to be, the sort of horror stories, or the something that you quoted, like you save $52 billion, whatever you said, but like to get those nuggets of information for our community so that we know. I don't know where to do that. Maybe you can address that, but those are the kinds of things. And I'm sorry, I haven't been on your website, so I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
Judy has-
If you Google Poughkeepsie Health Equity Report, the top hit will be the Health Equity Report for Poughkeepsie from 2021, which is the most recent year. And that breaks down all of these kinds of health metrics. And it lists, it's like bar graphs, what's Poughkeepsie, what's the rest of Dutchess County, what's the whole of New York State minus New York City, and then the whole of New York State, including New York City. And I was looking at it, and you basically have higher rates of low birth weight babies, higher rates of asthma visits, higher rates of asthma, higher rates of visits to ER for cardiovascular problems, all of these things. And some of them are like, 3 times the rate for the rest of Dutchess County, which is kind of telltale environmental racism, environmental justice issue, where for the rest of Dutchess County to have nice low rates of asthma and nice clean air, they put all the pollution in Poughkeepsie. So that is a really great place to start. And the other place to start would be the Climate Justice Working Group, which Vanessa spoke about with Raya Salter. They came up with a criteria called the Disadvantaged Communities Criteria. That has an interactive map broken down by census tract. And you can click on a census tract and you can get a measure of the environmental burden of that census tract and how it ranks versus the rest of the state. And you can also get a readout of vulnerability. So like how vulnerable is the population? And so Poughkeepsie has a whole bunch of census tracts that are more burdened than like 98% of other census tracts in New York State. So those are 2 easy to access places to start getting this kind of data.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Question over here.
That research is critical, but it would also be terrific if they had the resources, put a financial to monetize that pollution. What does it cost us out of our pocketbooks or the local community hospital to have a highly trained asthma doctor working 24 hours a day around the clock on emergency visits from children or adults? Also, when you calculate these things, every time a kid doesn't go to school, your community loses money, and every time someone's sick and can't go to work, the economy suffers, certainly the person who can't go to work. So these are critical factors. Thank you so much for that local answer. I think we have.
Yeah, Neil, this might be a two-parter.
Sure.
If the county legislator had a change of heart today, could they implement a sufficient enough composting program in the next 2 years? And if so, would your recommendation be to look at each community and let them start up their own, or have a big countywide massive program?
All of the above. You want your county to give your household, if you have a backyard, to give you an incentive, maybe buy a compost bin, reduce your taxes. If you take care of your organics on your own property, you eliminate food waste is about 15% household garbage. You will eliminate 15% of your waste forever. It'll never go in the waste stream. It'll get composted and be on your land. You want community scale, which I mentioned, and you do need centralized systems. I recommend 200 to 400. So with a county like Dutchess, I would locate them near your transfer stations and get some land and start with composting, going up to, let's say, 300 or 400 tons per day. And you would figure out where your population is, where the density is, and where. So you need 3 or 4 of these things around the county. Now, there's another solution. We'll call it the Prince George's solution, where they built a static pile system for more organic waste than they'll ever generate. So other counties are bringing it in, paying a tip fee, and Ulster County has excess capacity in their composting program. So for the short term, I would start go into the schools and start telling their kids to bug their parents to have a backyard compost bin so they could learn about worms and bugs and stuff. And then your community people who have gardens, you want them to build a compost pad next to it. And then finally, you want your decision makers to plan out the best sites for a central scale system. And you have a little bit of everything. There's one other alternative, and that is you can build an anaerobic digester. As methane decomposes, it gives off methane. We don't want it going into the air, but if you use technologies, you let it digest in a closed tunnels type system, you could recover the methane, and this amazing things are happening. Mr. Elrich wants to compost, collect the methane in an anaerobic digester, and then use the methane to produce hydrogen, because he has a bus fleet and a police fleet that just got a $15 million grant to convert to hydrogen fuel. So your compost can be the basis of energy self-reliance in your county. The technology is there. It hasn't been commercialized, but there are several companies. The plants are being constructed now. So in 2 years, I'll bet a nickel you could find a company that come in and build an anaerobic.
Great comment. Here's what I would caution about that, and I'm not an expert, but Mike, you all might be. If you start doing anaerobic digestion and then you try to transport that and you don't burn it on site, the leakage would exceed what the CLCPA.
Sure,
Yeah.
leakage is a major problem, and there are 2 reasons why you might want to stick with composting than anaerobic digestion. One, it's capital cost. It costs a lot of money, and 2, the leakage. You're absolutely correct.
So, well, last question, I'm sorry, but, do you think is 2 years not enough to do what you talked about with composting?
Absolutely. If you start tomorrow, let's say, passing the ordinances, making recycling and source separation of organics mandatory, you set it mandatory a year in advance. You do your education in schools as well as out of schools, and then you build up your backyard program, your community program, and then it'll take about 6 months to 9 months to sketch out your count and the population densities in the county to figure out where the best places are. You don't want one big compost plant, because then the transportation from the distant, you want them localized, and the economy of scale, you don't lose much by having a 200 ton per day plant as opposed to a 600 ton per day plant. And one last thing, I'll get to you, Courtney, in a minute. Anaerobic digestion is also very scalable. DC built a 5,000 ton per year plant just for the food scraps from their cafeteria. And in Maryland, there's a company, a European company, Devco, that has built 120,000 ton per year facility. So the scale is, and you don't lose much by having a small scale economy. Courtney, I believe you have a question.
Keep in mind that every year, or just recently, they passed in the county legislature a small solid waste management plan. And it's within it, it's a very interesting read. It's online, you can go to it and read the whole thing. It's long, but it's a very interesting read. But within it, they talk about the incinerator, and even though the contract is up in 2027, I'm sure that they're going to start writing a contract now, that they're not waiting. So we need to move on all of the things that we're talking about, right now, so that we at least have 2 years before. And they do say that they will they'll look at their swamp, their solid waste management plan, which they call the swamp. Every 2 years, they will look at it. So we need to educate ourselves. And also, we have a company that comes into villages and teaches us how to set up a compost system. He is located in Ulster County, I think, right now. He's talking to the town of Hurley. If you want to go online and Google Hurley, they're in the process of considering this, and they're local. So they're very good. They've done a project that is successful in New Paltz. And so they're a good group of people to work with. And if you come from all different towns, I don't know how many towns are represented here, but I see at least 3, maybe 4, but I think there's more of you. If we all go to our town boards and talk this up, it's going to help. Go to our CACs, get them involved, and get help.
What's the company's name?
Gateway, I believe it's called now, it's Greenway. Greenway, it's Shabbat Jackson.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
terrific things.
Greenway. And Greenway, and it's beautiful, it looks like a little fenced in garden, it's just beautiful. It's not at all an open pit. I know that there's one McEnroe's in Pine Plains, and you might all be aware of it. Medium, sorry. And it's done differently because it's a farm. But in towns and villages, it's done differently. It's just a beautiful thing.
If you, could I hold you up for a second? Working with the farmers is ideal. In fact, in Montgomery County, part of our plan is composting it by the farmers, by local farmers. And they get income and they get compost that they can sell or use on their farm. So integrating your urban composting with your local farmers surrounding, it's better to spread your organics around than the pollution in the air. And often you'll hear people say, well, we don't want to do anything because we want to take care of everything within our county. And yet the air pollution is going to go 400 miles around. So you're greatly impacting your neighbors, even though you don't think you are. Sorry, Courtney.
I just want to, it might sound counterintuitive, but I think a lot of this discussion of solutions is putting the cart before the horse in a big, big way. I think what the focus needs to be early on is the strategy of public awareness and building public pressure for these solutions. The solid waste management process system in this county didn't get built by volunteers and community groups. It got built by the machinations of the county government. And so, you know, Neil has an overwhelming amount of information on these systems and how to convert them to zero waste. Do not let yourselves get caught in the, like, being painted into the corner that you need to have the solutions for all of this. You do not. You are the impacted community. It is, you didn't create this problem, and it is not your personal responsibility to come up with the solutions for it. And so I would urge you to focus in this early stages of your campaign very much on what is the problem, and that you are raising awareness of the problem. And it is not your personal responsibility to solve every single aspect of this unjust waste management system. So I think, you know, what we did in Westchester early on, we attended all kinds of public meetings. Like, our county has a budget input process. We had volunteers at every single one of them. And what our first ask was, hire a certified zero waste consultant that's going to examine this system and figure out how to make us, get us to zero waste. And the upside of that is it's really hard to get meetings with all your elected officials, but if you testify at the Board of Legislators, they're all sitting right there. And, you know, so I would guess a lot of people in Dutchess don't really realize that. I mean, if the bins here at Vassar, a very savvy community, say landfill, I would guess a lot of people here in Dutchess don't realize their garbage is being burned. So problem number one, nobody knows it's a problem. So the solutions are there. I think as lay people and volunteers and community organizers, our job is to draw attention to the problem and not let them bog us down in the nitty-gritty of these solutions.
Thank you, Courtney. Let me also point out that when you start this debate, you've already started it here, but the comeback is, okay, we'll shut down this solution, this incinerator, as soon as we get to zero waste. And that's just foolish, because the biggest impediment to getting to zero waste is the incinerator. All their money, all their bureaucratic time, and all their political energy is going in to defend that plan. And how are those bureaucrats going to start planning for zero waste if they're pushing and dealing with the incinerator? So shutting down the incinerator is the first important step to get to zero waste. Yes, yes.
I just wondered if there's any examples of what an incinerator, what happened to it. It was turned into basketball fields, or it turned into a garden.
No, that's a very interesting thing. In Detroit in 2019, the citizens, after a long struggle, we got the incinerator shut down. And it has to be cleared and the land used for whatever. But clearing it is pretty difficult because it's all filled with toxic material. In fact, they started taking it down in Detroit. The citizens went up outrageous because the dust is spreading everywhere. This is toxic dust from the trucks going, the wheels going over the stuff, all that stuff. And it was a major problem. And of course, the community organized to stop that activity. So these things have to be cleared. It's valuable land. I don't know where it is.
Riverfront property.
Yeah, riverfront, it's incredibly valuable land. It has to be cleaned up, but it's a toxic site. So cleaning it up is very, very important. You can't just assume that you can knock it down and move the stuff away.
But where does that stuff go?
I'm sorry?
The stuff they're cleaning up, where does it go?
Well, it goes to a toxic landfill. Right now, the ash goes to a toxic landfill. So that material also would have to go to a toxic landfill that takes toxic material. They're all over there. Unfortunately, there are a lot of these sites around New York State as well as the rest of the country. Yes.
I do want to share a little bit about Vassar. I'm from Rico. I work for the Office of Sustainability here. We actually just are working with Greenway. We've worked with Greenway for many years on our campus-wide composting. Obviously, we have lots of issues. All the contamination is a real problem. But I do want to say students are aware that the incinerator is an issue. We are starting compost at all the apartment areas. It's just a slow process. As you talked about, it's still slow in, academic settings as well. But I do want, I don't know, students are behind this and can support this if we involve them.
Yeah. Well, let me say, I don't often get to college campuses or high school campuses, but I always point out, if you study garbage, you'll never be unemployed. Because there are so many aspects of garbage. You could be a political scientist dealing with garbage, a scientist, health provider, and an environmental political science major. This project, if you're starting Vassar this year and you're interested in political science and in the environment, I would urge the students to get involved and work with your local people. You will learn so much that by the time you graduate, you can move right into a good job, whether it's a government job, a consulting job, or a job like Courtney and Vanessa have, to be a solid waste organizer. So if there are students here, and I'd be very happy to suggest a whole list of research topics focused on Dutchess County, if you're so inclined. David?
So, somebody who's studied soil biology for quite some years, it's really important to understand, like, we need carbon in our soil, and the best way to do that is to compost. And we should start people at a very young age, like get kindergartners gardening at school. All the, elementary, high school, middle school, every school in the county should have a garden. And, there should be summer classes where they watch plant stuff. In the spring, they watch it grow and, harvest in the fall, in the beginning of the school year. And it will create a mindset where people understand the importance of not throwing their lunch scraps into the same bin that's going to go to the incinerator, because we want the carbon in the ground, not in the air.
David, you used the word mindset. It's critical, and the earlier your kids get the right mindset, the better it is. There's something called nature deficit disorder that psychologists have been focusing on for the last few years. It's actually a sub-discipline of psychology. And it means that kids who grew up and have absolutely no idea what natural processes are, they think Twinkies grow on trees. If you have a compost bin or a worm bin in your basement or a compost bin in your backyard, your kids will have higher IQs and they will not be nature deficit people. And I could tell you from experience and many of my friends whose kids have been involved in composting, it's an incredible education tool for young people. Even kids 3, 4, and 5 can understand about putting food in the ground instead of throwing it out. Yes.
I live in the backyard, so I compost and put it in the house. What about people in cities? Is there a place they can bring their compost? And what kind of, container can they use to?
Yes, there are for apartment dwellers, there are compost systems, small compost systems using worms. It sounds a little icky, but it's actually quite sanitary. And so you can compost in an apartment. If you have an apartment complex and there's land outside, you could do that. Or you could get involved in a community project in which you might bring your organics to the compost pile, which then becomes compost and nutrients for the plants and or animals. This is another.
Dutchess has drop-off locations. If you Google, they have several drop-off locations.
Also,
Dutchess has several drop-off locations.
Doesn't-
Yes, if you Google on the website of the waste management.
I don't know if everyone heard that. Ortley pointed out that Dutchess County has drop-off sites for source separated organics, and you can go to the county webpage to get them, get where they're located. The composting is very versatile. It's easy to compost no matter where you are. And how can I forget? My dear friend Mary Applehoff wrote the classic book, Worms Eat My Garbage. And then she came out with the sequel, Worms Eat More of My Garbage. And then it's a wonderful book. It belongs in every classroom. She was a teacher, and she had her kids bring in plastic bags with egg, food waste, and they composted it, and she started making composters out of them. She happened to be an expert in vermicomposting, shredding it and feeding it to worms. But it doesn't have to be that. But her book, Worms Eat My Garbage, is a real classic. I would recommend it.
Oh, sure. Two very different questions. Sure. Is there some place where something's available, information specific to the Dutchess County incinerator, but where emissions, various forms of pollution, like you mentioned metals, like mercury and cadmium and so on, is that measured and in the public domain somewhere? Because that seems to me like an important basis for, the important rhetorical basis for making an argument is to start from what this thing could actually.
Mike Evol's webpage, noburn.org. Mike Evol, I'm sorry. Beyond Burn. Excuse me. Mike Evol, WALL at beyondburning.org. And he has a little, like a page on every incinerator, operating incinerator in the country. And Mike, of course, is available to follow up information.
That data that he has on there is from their filings with the Department of Environmental Conservation that has to issue the Title V air permits. So it's not like Mike's making up data. He's just crunchy because like DEC kind of intentionally makes it opaque and very inaccessible to the public.
Yeah.
So Mike kind of crunches it and puts it up.
Yeah, thank you.
And lots of times the company themselves do their own testing there.
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind with that is there's only like 11 or 12 things that they even have to test for. And there's even fewer that they continuously monitor for. So, you don't find what you're not looking for. So one thing, for instance, that they don't look for is PFAS. So it's like, it's awful as it is, but it's like a tiny fraction of what they're actually emitting.
On continuous monitoring, Mike Ewell, again, he's quite terrific. He got the state of Oregon to require constant monitoring and putting the data on a webpage so citizens can see every minute what's coming out of that incinerator. That's now the law in Oregon. And of course, we would like to see that.
That would be a nice law.
We would see that as part of a package here in Dutchess County, and of course, Westchester County. Did you have another one?
I had another question, it's
Sure.
slightly different, so the recycling line going up and to the right. Question about sort of like what the state of the art looks like and how that works practically. So my understanding, please correct me, is that like, if you have nicely separated different plastics, the ones that are, the little 1 and the little 2, that is somewhat easier to recycle, at least some of those. But most products that you buy are multiple kinds of plastics and maybe metals and papers all mixed together in the same product. And my understanding, please correct me, is that it's at least very, very difficult to recycle those, and that a lot of recycling facilities simply can't, they're not equipped to. So what does the state of the art look like? I mean, is there a chart, is there a path towards high rates of recycling of the kinds of mixed materials that we have so much?
There are two mechanisms. The first mechanism is to give incentives to the household, and you implement what is called unit pricing for garbage collection, which means if Jill is a conscientious recycler and composter, and she puts out 1 bag of garbage every 2 weeks, and I'm a slob and I live next to her and I put out 5 bags of garbage every week, I pay 5 times as much as Jill does. It's called pay as you throw, but it's basically unit pricing, because you don't get charged for putting out your recyclables or your organics for composting. So you only get charged for your waste, and you change your habits. And and the second thing that you mentioned about packaging, that the hybrid packaging is the worst. Very simple example: if you have milk, it's beautiful, corrugated, you tear it up, it's beautiful white stuff, worth $300-400 a ton, and they put a plastic cap on it, making it a hybrid. You have to tax hybrid packages, so that if some company wants to put that plastic top instead of a gable top that comes off without any new material, they have to pay a tax on that package because it's a hybrid and it's harder to recycle. So those are two mechanisms: one for the household to give incentives to the household to recycle, and the tax on these products and packages that are being made with hybrid plastics or combinations of cardboard and plastic.
Is the tax something that can be done at a county level? It seems like that would be really difficult. So state maybe, nationally it's hard.
That's correct. It may be, and it may be that it's a state level problem. But pay as you throw or unit pricing, there's a lot, you can do that locally. And you can also ban certain products if you want. In Europe, if you want to sell a soda, a certain percent of that of the products you put out have to be in refillables. And my suggestion for this county, you can do this on a county level, that if you want to sell a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi in Dutchess County, next year 10% of all the products have to be in refillables, and next year it's 12%, and then you keep going until we're back to the 1950s, where I remember, as many of us do, everything came in refillables, from glass to orange milk to orange juice, and of course soda and so forth. So it is a good question. Some of these issues are statewide, like a bottle bill would be statewide. We have a great bottle bill here. Could be improved by having a requirement, as they do in Europe, to a minimum amount of refillables. But that is a very good question, and that's why we need lawyers to figure out. And it also needs politicians, elected officials, who want to do the right thing. They're critical. In fact, one or two, even obviously in the minority, they can get you into meetings. And I think Courtney had a meeting just last Friday, excuse me, with the county executive of Westchester, his entire solid waste management staff, and we did pretty well. And we've got follow-up meetings and so on, and that meeting happened because citizens registered this company.
Because of public shaming.
Shaming, good, yeah. So it's all possible. There are complications, certainly, but the first thing is, as David said, we have to get your elected officials here in the proper mindset, in the zero waste mindset. Yes, sir.
Do you have any contacts in the Dutchess County government?
Yeah, Vanessa and.
No, we're Westchester.
There was,
I offered to meet with them. I'd be happy to meet with them just as, again, with the official, the community groups in Westchester County. Going tomorrow to Warren County. Warren County doesn't have an incinerator, but they send their garbage to Washington County, which does have an incinerator. So the answer is you can get to talk to your officials. You have to be sophisticated about it, but we've got people right here who are very sophisticated about it, and not only how to get the meetings, but how to act when you're at the meetings. And in fact, I applaud Vanessa and Courtney, because before that Friday meeting, we had a prep meeting to prepare ourselves. You know, Neil, you keep quiet until this, and so on and so forth. It was sort of like a strategy session. And that's what you need. And we've got leaders here, and and we can train leaders. It's not that difficult to become an organizer.
So
It's a pain in the neck
yeah,
to do, but it's not.
I
that
was
hard to
looking
organize.
at your calendar for the county. You've got a climate smart communities task force. You've got an office for the aging meeting coming up. I would just have people at every single one of them be like, elderly people are more susceptible to harms from air pollution. What is this board doing about the incinerator? And then go to climate smart communities and say, what are we doing? Like, we should be doing more with food scraps recycling. That'll get us points for our climate smart communities score. What are you doing about that? And then if they have budget meetings, or there's like a veterans one, be like, you know, veterans are so worried about burn pits. We have an incinerator right here in our community harming our veterans. And just like every single meeting show up. The relevant boards on your county legislature, show up to those. That'll be the place where you can see which elected officials are sympathetic. And then hopefully you'll find yourself a champion who will work with you to like push this along. But
This is an election year
yeah.
for the local officials.
As Courtney was saying, the climate smart task force in Dutchess, for the town of Poughkeepsie. In Dutchess County, they have just completed a 2-year database of greenhouse gas emissions, both for the town of Poughkeepsie and for the 7 communities in the Hudson Valley. And now they're going to publish that database, and they have to create an action plan about how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And my question, when this was brought up by my colleague on the Climate Smart Task Force, I'm on the Conservation Advisory Commission, but she serves on both. I said, where did they put the Dutchess County incinerator? And she said, it wasn't on ours. So I'm going to the next meeting, which is on the 25th, of the Climate Smart Task Force for Dutchess County, to ask that question, because that's what I'm interested in. They should have, collected that data. So that's one source.
I'm on the one for Westchester. So Dutchess and Westchester.
Dutchess and Westchester are doing this Climate Action Planning Institute with the Hudson Valley Regional Council simultaneously. And so I'm representing Peekskill on ours, but Westchester County is doing one as well. And they also did not account for our trash incinerator. And the reason for that being is that they're starting out with municipal governments. And so they're only counting like the garbage that the municipality throws away, not like residential garbage collection, which I think is total BS. Because probably like yours here, it's the County Industrial Development Agency that owns the incinerator and contracts out, with, in our case, Wind Waste to operate it, but they use that to say they don't need to take into account those emissions. But they did look at what they were, and I do think it was probably very eye-opening for them. So just what you can advocate for is a community audit, so as opposed to municipal audit, community audit, because then that is going to include all the garbage that goes to the trash incinerator.
Folks, our wonderful AV support guy in the back, Edmund, informed me that there's a class in here at 8 o'clock. And he needs time to put away all of the equipment. So I welcome you to continue talking amongst yourselves, but I think we need to end the microphone part of the presentation. So let's thank Neil and everybody who's here tonight.
We have a lot of people that from Zero Waste Studies. Randy, it's great, fun.
I want to thank you all for coming.
Yeah,
So this
thank you.
is great. And for signing up, and we'll be getting in touch with you.
And I'm happy to come back if you need. I'm sorry that the no time.
Well, if you can.
Thank you. My card, my personal. So I haven't, I don't sit in my house. I'm just a volunteer community member. Well, there. Or actually, just give me your paper, I'll write my info.